6, 1975, and I am interviewing Mr. Samuel Haber in New York City. First, I think we should find out with what organization were you affiliated from 1944 to 1948?
Well, 1944, I was actually in the United States Army, and I was in the Army, in fact, from 1943 to 1946. And in 1946, in October, I came back to the United States and went back to my job in Washington with the State Department. And then in April, or actually March 10th, 1947, I joined the JDC, and my first assignment was in Germany, where I was in charge of the entire DP population and the problems in the DP camps.
Now, when did you first meet professionally with an American Jewish chaplain?
Well, I think actually it was shortly after my arrival in Germany, that is, arrival in Germany as the JDC director, which was on the 26th of April, 1947. And while I can't pinpoint the exact date of when I actually met the first chaplain, I would say very likely shortly after my arrival in Germany, because I had contact with them on one or another occasion, depending upon certain problems which existed in the DP camps, especially in Bavaria.
Now, you met Rabbi Abraham Klausner.
Yes, as a matter of fact, Abe Klausner was, at that time, probably the most active chaplain in the American zone of Germany. I did not know at that time, nor do I recall at the moment whether I knew the chaplain in the British zone or, for that matter, in Berlin. You want to stop it for a moment? So that Klausner, who had taken actually a much more active role before my arrival, it was directly after the liberation that Abe, I think, was one of the first of the chaplains who came over. He was a young, aggressive chaplain who left no stone unturned to be helpful to the Central Committee of Liberated Jews, and in fact he became a thorn in the side of the American Army. But by the time I came in, as I said before, at the end of April, on 26th of April, 1947, Abe had already by that time he was still in Bavaria, but was much less active since the situation had fairly well stabilized itself. Whereas before that, in connection with one or another problem that existed in the DP camps, Abe was a very effective and loud spokesman for the DPs, as I said, so much so that he became a thorn in the side of the military.
Fine. What other chaplains were you?
Well, I had rather close working relationship, but I don't quite remember in detail how, with Herman Dicker, whom you told me you have met, and who worked for us subsequently here in New York for a short time. Herman was, of course, a very different kind of a person than Abe Klausner, as I guess everybody else was. And all of them, Herman and Chaplain Vida, if I remember correctly, he was the chief chaplain at one time with his offices in Frankfurt, whom I have not seen for some years, but who wrote a book, which I just showed you a few minutes ago, the introduction to which I wrote. And then, of course, there was Chaplain Spiro. Spiro was, as I recall, I understand he died. I did not see him for many years. But he has a famous brother in Fürth, in Nuremberg, near Nuremberg, an Orthodox rabbi. And Chaplain Spiro, I think his first name was Abe, but I don't remember. Abe is right, Abraham. A very intelligent and very articulate person. Now, the relationship of the JDC to the chaplains in general, whether it was Abe Klausner or Abe Spiro or Herman Dicker or Chaplain Vida or others whose name at the moment escapes me, or Max Browdy, or at the time that I came in, Max was in the 7th Army. I believe he was a chaplain at headquarters. As a matter of fact, I had a good deal to do with his securing the position which he has occupied since then as the head of the Ort. All of these people, as indeed all of the JDC people and the other Jewish organizations which worked, had one primary interest and one primary concern, and that was the concern of the displaced persons, of the what we call the Sherita Pleta, the surviving remnant, those people who were located in, as you well know, in many camps. I think at one time I counted some 63 different camps in the American, the British, the French zones of Germany, and in Berlin and in Austria. The JDC, of course, played the most vital and fundamental role in the care and maintenance, although the basic responsibility was that of the UNRWA, before that the IRO, so that the relationship with the chaplains was one of a very close working relationship, to the extent that their interest, which coincided with that of the joint, had to do with not so much material help, but spiritual involvement, where, for example, a chaplain might have come to the JDC and told us that in a camp in Fulda or a camp in Bad Reichenau or Feldafing or Fehrenwald or Landsberg, they needed certain religious items or books. The JDC always listened with very close attention to their requests. So that in that respect, the JDC and the chaplains had a very close working and a relationship and an understanding of the problem, with which we were, in one sense, in a very limited sense, working together.
Were they superfluous at that point, when the joint really started getting moved to move? In other words, at the time you were there, what function did they really serve? Were they needed?
My answer to that, I think, would have to be they always served a useful function. Even though we must go back, it's very difficult 20 years later or 25 years later to place ourselves in a DP camp, to know that the survivors, those who survived in Germany, those who came back after Kielce, the pogrom in Poland on the 6th of July 1946, those who somehow managed to survive in one or another way. The JDC was an organization, and is an organization, which catered to a large extent to the spiritual as well as to the material needs. The rabbi or the chaplain, after all, let's call him by his proper name. The army calls him a chaplain, but we call him a rabbi. Yeah. And as such, the mere fact of his presence, even though there may not have been a basic fundamental religious orientation, after all, the Holocaust had some factor in raising the question even then, is there a God, or the God after the Holocaust? The rabbi therefore served a purpose of identification, a purpose of finding themselves. I would therefore say that almost until the end, they did have a function. In addition to that, they also played a certain role with the military. The fact that they wore the uniform, and the fact, therefore, that they were part of the armed forces, with the insignia of the Ten Commandments, gave them a prestige which made it possible for them to approach the military. And very frequently, again, as in the case particularly at the very beginning with Abe Klausner, as a good example of it. One could accomplish a great deal in one way, and at a certain time, at another time, the same chaplain could accomplish something different, but always with some value in their contact, both with the DPs as such and with the military.
So if I understand what you're saying, is that from the period that you were there, from April of 47...
Till the beginning of 54, I remained in Germany. With the JDC now.
Fine, yeah.
I was 10 years in Germany, because 3 years before that I was with the Army.
Right. Well, but from 47 on, when you were with the JDC, you saw the need for the chaplain to be in the spiritual area. You saw, in one sense, that they were able to deal with the DPs on that level, and to perhaps inspire some hope in them again, or to help them. And on the second level, you were able to use them to approach the military. Is that what you're saying?
Not I, not we.
Well, that's
not
what
the
I wanted
JDC.
to clarify.
No. But a committee in a camp, for example, could have a problem. They would not, we would not use them. We would discuss various problems with them, and they with us. But a committee in a camp might have a problem in which they would like to get the help of a chaplain. Now, I must take this as a step further. During the period that we're talking about, you have to separate it. By the beginning of 1950, perhaps,
Well, excuse me, my study is from 44 to 48.
Oh, that's all?
Yeah.
Your study is only that period. Well, during that period, then, I have no comment except to say that they were exceedingly useful, and particularly so, and there's a man in this office you might interview, Abe Hyman. Very important for you to see him.
Abe Hyman is here?
I will mention it, I'll come back to him in a minute.
I thought he was in Israel.
I'll come back to him in a minute. Hold that machine. During this period that we're talking about, there was the office of the Jewish advisor to General Clay, to the commander-in-chief. At this particular time, in 1948, my brother, Dr. William Haber, was actually the last of the Jewish advisors, in effect followed by Abe Hyman, who sort of liquidated that office, and you might call him the last of the advisors. Now, if Abe is around, you could inquire of him, what relationship did the office of the Jewish advisor have with the chaplains?
Mm-hmm.
Because Herbert Friedman was a chaplain, and he was the assistant to Rabbi Philip Bernstein, who was the second of the advisors, preceded by Judge Simon Rifkin, followed by Judge Leventhal, followed by Harry Greenstein, and followed by my brother. Yes. With the value of the chaplains, and did they serve a purpose until the end? That is, he's taking the period, the end of the war till 48. Mm-hmm. And it was at this point that I said that the relationship of the chaplains also to the office of the Jewish advisor, and at that point I said, one man you ought to see is Abe Hyman. Yeah. So he says, where is he? I said, he's here. And here you are. So
I thought you were going back to
now you continue with me then, if you want to.
Fine, good.
What else? And then we will see just where Abe comes in. While I'm here, we can do it together. Or
no, it's all right. I'll take.
I have answered some of the. Yes, go ahead.
Well, were there any other chaplains with whom you dealt with? You didn't tell me in any detail about Spiro or Klausner.
No, the ones I dealt with that I mentioned that I could remember was Chaplain Weidner, Abe Klausner at the very beginning, Abe, I gave you all the names before, now they skip my
Dicker,
Herman Dicker, and Abe who died. Spiro. The only four that I remember, there may have been others.
Lou Barish,
oh, yes, Lou Barish, of course.
very important.
Lou Barish, I knew.
He was a member of our staff.
Yes, I knew Lou Barish. I knew Lou Barish. Then, of course, I mentioned Herb Friedman. Obviously, who was the guy who ran through together with you, except you were there at the very end. Herb had left.
He got me into the picture.
A very important figure in this whole situation. I had just begun to mention the office of the Jewish advisor, beginning with Simon Rifkin and Leventhal and Harry and Bill, and of course you as the last of the advisors. And
Harry Greenstein.
I mentioned Harry. I said Harry Greenstein. Yes, sure.
No? Bernstein. Phil Bernstein.
Yeah. I say Rifkin, Bernstein, Leventhal, Harry Greenstein, Bill Haber, and you. Those are the ones. Why I remember these goddamn fool things, I don't know, but I do. What else do you have, my friend?
Well, how would you characterize the role? You see, we're dealing with very general...
I said the following, Abe. I said the following before. I was asked almost a similar question but in a different format. And I said the following, that the chaplain, as I recall them, had really a number of basic functions. One was fundamentally, since they were army people, a relationship with the army. They wore the uniform, and as such they were in the service. Different chaplains reacted differently. A Klausner with a hammer in his hand and a sharp tongue and an aggressive guy at a particular moment.
That's important.
At a particular moment. Klausner at the end would not have been the same Abe Klausner. He might have tried to act the same way, but his power would have been different. This was the very beginning.
Well, how did you see Klausner at the end?
Well, I didn't have anything really to do with him. I met him really at the end. Don't forget, I told you before, I came in on the 26th of April, 1947. Already the camps were established, the central committees were established, the British zone, the French zone, the Berlin, and the American zone. They were fairly well-established committees. And we dealt at that time, for example, in Bavaria, with a gentleman, a colonel by the name of Sidders. Colonel Sidders, you remember him?
The liaison between the Central Committee
Yeah,
and the Army.
And the whole thing was on a different basis. None of the things in which he, for example, was involved in the shooting incident in the camp and all that, that had been already past history. And therefore, Klausner at the time I met him was nothing. I think he had been transferred even. He was...
As a matter of fact, he was a thorn in the side of the...
My very expression.
Exactly what he
I
said.
used the same expression, identical expression, which is on the tape, a thorn in the side of the military.
Yeah.
Now, I said the following furthermore, Abe.
He had served his...
He had served his plea.
Very, very important.
Yeah.
I'll discuss it with you.
Fine, okay.
Now, Abe, I have said then the following. With relation to the army, the chaplain had a role to play. The people could go to the army. They could talk about problems, number one. In relation to the JDC, we were friends. We worked together. They came to us with certain problems. They did not get themselves involved in the material assistance except where they themselves saw certain things that were not being done. They came to us in connection with certain spiritual needs of different camps. In some camps where there was a strong religious element, a Spiro or a Dicker or somebody else would come and say they need tefillin or machzerim or other religious items. The other thing was primarily that they had a relationship with us in the totality of the problem because we were all engaged in a sense in the same...
We're all one team.
All one team, practically speaking.
But you said that the DP spoke to the chaplain quicker than they would speak to the JDC.
No, I said, for example, on certain things where, for example, there was a spiritual need in a camp where the JDC did not provide that. A death, for example, a marriage, for example, a circumcision, for example, I don't know. But on these things where the JDC may not in and by itself have provided the kind of assistance which a
Material
rabbi...
needs.
Material
JDC,
needs when...
Spiritual needs.
But they made recommendations to the JDC.
That's it.
On shortcomings, on gaps and so forth, where they saw a need.
But
They were
why would the JDC man on the spot see that? In other words, where was the rabbi and where was the JDC? What was the...
Well, now that's, that question is easily answered. For example, first of all, the JDC did not have a person in every camp.
Right.
We had, for example, let's say for all of northeastern Bavaria, we had one person, Irving Kwasnik, who had a number of camps in that area. Let's take the Czech border, Hof, Packing, and...
How many areas did you have? 5, 6?
Yeah, we had 6 districts, and we had about 6 or 7 people. A chaplain could go into a camp where, for example, a JDC person had not been for a couple of months. We would automatically deal, as another point, we would more or less deal as follows. You have to know the picture at the time. The JDC office was located at number 3 Siebertstrasse in Munich. Across the street at number 4 was the Central Committee of Liberated Jews of the American Zone. They dealt with the camps. They were, you could say, a foreign office of the and Aryeh Nesher was the foreign minister, the foreign secretary, whatever he was. They would therefore come, our dealings were primarily with the Central Committee. The pressure boys were right across the street from where my office was. and they were real pressure boys. Now, the chain of command, you could say, was Bad Reichenhall, as an example, or Landsberg, or Feldafing, or Fulda, Fulda was the British zone. No, Fulda was the American zone, or Zeilsheim, it doesn't matter which one. Would have a problem, they would deal with the Central Committee. The Central Committee would then come to me, or come to us. The chaplain, on the other hand, would go in. First of all, he was a wall to complain, to say JDC isn't doing it now.
Another pair of ears and another mouth.
That's all.
In other words, a JDC man might have been in the same situation on Tuesday when a problem arose, and when there was no problem. On Wednesday, a problem arose. It so happened that the chaplain visited.
I see.
Yeah, there was no area, there was no well-defined area where each one had this responsibility. Everybody was interested, the whole team, from to give the Jewish Advisor's Office the top position in terms of the military situation, from the Jewish Advisor's Office to the very clerk to the typist, let's say, in the JDC. We were all interested in the same problem. Everybody was au courant, conversant with it. So you had a chaplain who was a roving ambassador. He was interested in seeing where there were frictions, where a situation had eroded. He reported if it's within the competence of the JDC, he reported to the JDC.
He would pick up the telephone.
If he could do it, he would take care of it.
No, he couldn't take care of. Well, there were certain things which he could not take care of. For example, let's say that some reason or other there was a sudden new group came in, let's say after July 6, 1946. All of a sudden, Bad Reichenhall, which was close to the Austrian border, where they came across. They got 200 more people. UNRWA or IRO was not in a position at that particular moment to immediately furnish the need. Or let's say there was a terrible winter in 47, for example. 47, one of the most terrible winters. 46 was it? Mm-hmm. Well, for example, the chaplain would go into a camp and see terrible need. Or one of our nurses, for example, would go into a camp, she'd meet the chaplain in the camp. The chaplain would complain about certain things or so. Well, the nurse would say, or the social worker, why don't you call up Haber or whoever was before me, Leo Schwartz, all of a shalom, before me. And so there was a sort of a coordinated, but with very defined, for example, let's take another example. That's not a one equals two proposition. Let's take Abe Hyman as an example. I recall very well Abe and I walking in Neufreimann, outside of Munich. There was a camp there. Now, Abe would see certain things, and he was part of the office of the Jewish advisor. He was not part of the JDC. So saying, why can't we do something about this? So it was a proposition in which the chaplain played a very important role. Spiritually, the Jews in the camp saw him as a rabbi. They didn't see the uniform. Any more, as I said that before too, any more than they saw with me with the uniform. They saw AJDC. They didn't see the major leave. And so it was a coordinated thing with differences of opinion, and very frequently, probably, I couldn't say this
You're right. I can anticipate what you're going to say.
with any degree of assurance, that if the chaplain would call me up and say, for God's sake, Sam, why can't you do something here? Well, there may have been a good reason why we couldn't. But the chaplain acted in coordination with us, and the fact is that on a personal level, for instance with Herman Dicker, with Abe Spiro, with Chaplain Weider. I don't know if you ever read his book. Did you read?
Oh, sure, I read the whole thing.
Yeah?
Sure, I wrote documents.
Sure. I wrote the introduction there
No, you did.
for it. In any event, so does that answer your question? The relationships
His letters
there.
to his wife, and so forth, he reproduces in, yeah, he has a running.
Yeah.
Did you read that?
I just got it.
So, what else would you like to know, my friend?
Well, specifically, none of these other activities. Were you ever called upon with the chaplain to smooth relations between the DP and the Army?
The contrary. Colonel Sithers might come to me and say that a chaplain is sticking in his craw, and could I do something about it? Or the opposite, where the colonel was upset over something of the Central Committee, and I would say to him, oh, forget it, just forget it, leave it alone, it'll blow over. But actually, as far as I can't recall, the only argument I think I ever had was with Abe. The only was.
What was the argument about?
I don't remember. I don't even remember to whom I'm talking. I don't know what happened 30 years ago.
It doesn't make any difference. You can have an argument with Abe every day.
Or with me, for that
I
matter.
live with him. I live with him every day. I talked to him yesterday about this problem for several hours.
Are you really?
Sure.
Well, now, here is a man, then, whom you were looking for in Israel, and you thought he was in Israel.
No, we were looking for each other here.
As a matter of fact, let's cut.